ladies and gentlemen of the press, and good morning to everyone who's listening to us on ZJB Live right now and on YouTube. Sorry for the late start. Welcome to the closing press conference for the end of this year's financial aid mission. On the panel this morning, we have Her Excellency the Governor, Sarah Tucker, the Honorable Premier, Joseph Farrell, and the Deputy Director of the Overseas Territories Department within the FCDO, Mr. Adam Pyle. Press, we have done this before, so on this occasion, I'm going to ask that when you are asking your question, please introduce yourself and your media house before your question. We have 1 hour allotted to this press conference, and I am going to open the press conference with opening remarks from our panelists. So we're going to start with Her Excellency the Governor with her opening remarks, then moving on to the Premier and then Mr. Pyle, and I'll open the floor up to the media. Aichi?
Nesta, and good morning, Montserrat. It's my first FAM this time, so it's been an interesting time over the last few months, actually, working with the FS, Premier and Cabinet to get ready for quite a long week. We've had an action-packed time. And it's been very collegiate. We've had some very open and frank conversations whilst everybody's been here. And I think a lot of the work that's been done has set out really clearly the ambition that the government of Montserrat has for Montserrat and how we want to drive that forward. And we hope that with support from the FCDO that we'll be able to make some progress over the next few years to do that. Slightly different approach, I think, this year, and some of the changes that we've made is to make sure that the team that have come across from the FCDO, we've had 6 people here this time, so that they can have a real understanding of Montserrat, what it's like to be here, the beauty of Montserrat. So we've been to hike to hell and back, I call it, but we went to Hell's Gate together and came back and saw a beautiful, part of the north of the island that we probably wouldn't normally see. We went to visit the goat farm. We've been out to the schools. Adam and I read stories yesterday. Well, Adam did the reading, I did the watching and the singing with the children, trying to really get an understanding. And Adam and I actually ended up at the Pink Palace yesterday. So we really have done Montserrat as much as we can. And that's really important because it's easy when you sit in London. I've worked in London in the FCDO, and spreadsheets come across your desk and you're trying to operate and understand Montserrat, and an opportunity for the team to really get to know us. And I would say, and I think I speak for everybody that's been involved, it's been Team Montserrat this week. Everybody has worked together, very frank and very open about the challenges we have, but really trying to find solutions and a way forward in terms of all the ambition that we've got. As head of the public service, I'd like to first of all thank the FS, the Deputy FS and the team in MoFem who have done a tremendous amount of work to put all the numbers together and to put everything in place so that we can have some very good discussions, all the ministries and all the departments for the work they've done. And it's not just thanking those that have actually been to present and pull the information together, but I recognise that puts pressure on everybody else that's not doing that. And so people have had to pick up the slack in the departments and the ministries to cover for those that have been pulled onto FAM. So thank you. All of your work was presented and made a positive impact. And I think we've done the very best that we can here as a public service to support the government of Montserrat in their ambition to showcase the work that we want to take forward here in Montserrat. So I just like to say thank you to all the public service for the work they've done, and thank you to the FCDO for giving us a week of your time. And I'll hand to the Premier.
Thank you very much. Media houses, good morning. It's been a very good week. This is my 3rd FAM, and I must say that I've got more out of this FAM than I've had out of previous, mainly because the structure is different. There was less ticking boxes, and while the technicians were speaking to our technicians and reporting, Adam and Governor and the other team, FS and the team, we took them into the communities. This is an added feature where they were able to meet with stakeholders, your farmers, your fishers. When we looked at government housing stock, they saw the conditions of the housing stock. They went to schools and they saw the need for STEM teachers in schools where the children were left behind. It was a real good experience last week when we met and took out in the field. Then this week, on Monday and Tuesday, we met in-house. And of course, we had some very frank discussions, very tough discussions. We were frank with each other. But what is amazing this time around is that as the Montserrat team, we have experienced that partnership which we have been speaking about so often. I've never felt that kind of relationship and a real partnership as has been in this last 2 days. We really feel that it's no longer FCD on us, but rather us interested in Montserrat. And that is important for us to bring out here. That is not the FCD team coming to us, but rather the way we approach the issues that confront Montserrat, both short-term, medium, and long term, it is a team effort, both Montserrat and the UK. And this is important for us going forward. Of course, we discuss issues like MUL, electricity, and we all experience what's happening, what's happening around us. And we discussed that. We had a representation from MUL, we had a representation from Access, of course, another vexing issue. We spoke mainly about government maintenance problems, the maintenance of government assets, which is far behind, and how can we rectify and maintain those assets to bring them back to a standard. And other discussions, public service, the government spoke about it. But all in all, it was a very good farm. we of course itemize what we expect, what we think we need. There's no promises, of course, no guarantees, but we made our case, and I know the team listened, and we had our discussions. So all in all, I want to thank the team, both FCDO, and I want to thank, of course, I want to join the governor and thank the public servants, and especially the MOFEM team, for it's a really different face to farm this year, totally different face. Not the farm where you come and sit down and report. That was totally different. So I really appreciate it, and I want to thank the team and all those who took part, the governor, myself, and FS meets once a week to plan farm before, and then we met with the other teams. So it's been a long process to get here to fine-tune farm. So it's no longer just a reporting mechanism, but rather a working approach to getting Montserrat's needs on the table. So with those few words, I want to pass over to Adam.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll start by wishing the governor a very happy birthday.
Yes.
I'm sure she'll kill me for saying that, but thank you. It's really good to be back in Montserrat. We've been here around a week now, and as the Premier and the Governor said, it's really important for us to get out and about. So we spent a lot of time with the Premier and his ministers and the Governor's office, but yeah, we've met a huge range of public servants, both based in ministries and out on the ground, police, in agriculture. We've met with the opposition, which is really important for us, business leaders, everyday Montserratians, and as the Governor said, even school children, which is probably one of the best things I've done ever, and even on a hike to Hell's Gate. So we've seen, but on a serious point, that's really important, because I think in previous years, people may have come and stayed in certain bits of the island, but to get out on the island, go out to different communities, and as the Premier said, see what the state of social housing is really important for us. What I can say is I'm really, really impressed by the skill and commitment of the public servants we've met, just how hard they've been working. And for a small island, Montserrat has a huge range of talent, but also what has also impressed me is the ambition. And quite often we've spoken about basically things which are keeping the lights on, but the scale of the ambition to move Montserrat on, and we can work with that. So what's happened since the last financial aid mission, so when we all sat in this room about a year ago? So after the last financial aid mission, we managed to secure a small uplift in the recurrent budget for Montserrat. That was around $2 million EC dollars. We've importantly committed several millions more to keep with the depreciation of the pound, keep the local budget in the same level in EC dollars, which is really important so Government of Montserrat can plan. And as you've seen with the recent announcements, the extra £3 million for critical equipment, so that's the CT and mammography scanners, most important of all, the medium-speed generator, because we've experienced the blackouts like you're experiencing all the time, oxygen plant, and much more. We are really pleased to see some big and I know long-promised projects actually moving forward. So the hospital, we are all working at speed to get that done, and I'm really pleased to see that the work's going to begin in the new year. The port project, since we've been here again, we've committed extra funding for that, so I think the total UK funding has gone up to £28.3 million, but again, that just has to happen, so really supportive of that. And I think traditionally the FCDO have tried to be the conduit for everything in the UK government to work with the Government of Montserrat, and we're trying to broaden that out, so because I think it just hasn't quite worked. So good examples of this are the UK Health Security Agency have been providing support to the Health Ministry, not just on COVID, but also broadening out sort of better health services in Montserrat, you know, things like how you recruit and retain nursing staff, how you reward them, better technical development. We've got the partnership between the Montserrat and Suffolk Police, which is sharing best practice and learning both ways, but also people like the JNCC who've been working with the farmers and fishers, particularly the fishers, on sustainable fishing. I think on this mission, just picking up on what the Governor and Premier have said, is, for me, it's critical on the tone, because that builds the working relationship. And as the Governor said, we're all Team Montserrat. So I've been very clear, we are not here to mark people's homework. You know, we're not here to be critical and add value and then fly out. We're here to work out where support is needed, what the technical support is, and also what we can learn from Montserrat. There are things I've seen here in the ministries which we're not doing in the UK or we're not doing in other overseas territories. So taking that best practice from Montserrat, it's a real shared endeavour. I want to make sure we're all working on the best outcome for the island. I have to be frank, we don't yet know what the budget's going to be for next year. We're still working on that, and this is why this mission is really important, so we can get that understanding and baseline together. ODA, or aid, has been cut, UK aid has been cut dramatically around the world over the last year, but I'm really pleased to say we have managed to so far safeguard that across the overseas territories. And what I can promise you is we will go in and fight to defend that in the UK. The Premier said about the partnership. I think, again, we've talked about this a lot over the several years, but I think this is the year I feel like it's really starting to come together, and we've seen the partnership in action. So what does that mean? So I think, for me, the spirit of the partnership is we bring different things to the table and we have different things to deliver, but they're all ultimately to support the people of Montserrat. And you know, from the UK team, we have to take back and show that we're delivering value for money for what we're funding in Montserrat. But what we have to deliver in Montserrat is that we're respecting the democratically elected government and making sure that they've got the autonomy to make the decisions. You know, the best thing that can happen for Montserrat is local people making local decisions. And this year, it feels different, and I think that's credit due to the public service in Montserrat. So I think we've seen a real big shift in strategic thinking, sort of looking beyond just individual budgets and individual projects to build. You know, what is the outcome, the effect we want to achieve for the people of the island? And I think we've achieved a lot over the last year and this mission. You know, we've had the major projects move forward, we've got the extra budgetary support, and the extra capital funding. That's only because of the work that's been done within the public service to have projects which are oven ready to take out and move forward. Really pleased to see that the £30 million SIPREG capital programme is fully subscribed. That's really important, because we can then move forward and thinking about what comes after that. And so we've had discussions around the successor project and making sure that we're not only building on the projects which are made here, but we've got the right foundation, you know, sort of thinking about whether it's investing in social housing, public services, or economic growth, you know, bringing that all together, what the net effect of that is. I think thanks to the ministries, we've got a really good understanding of the pressures people are facing, where extra funding is needed. But one thing I just want to reassure people is it's not just a spreadsheet with facts and figures in. We understand that it's about people's lives in Montserrat, it's about their ambitions, and understanding that it's been tough. It's been a tough year for people in the community, in the public service. So what happens next? So we're going to keep working with the public service and the Premier and his team here. We're building up that data and sort of the ambitions of where the extra spend is needed, what the best settlement we can achieve, and making sure that it's prioritised, because there is a lot of ambition that's come forward from the public sector here, which we really welcome, but it's just working out, you know, not only in terms of funding, how that can be achieved, but also capacity in the public service. But I just wanted to thank the Governor's Office, the Premier, the public service, and just people across the island for the really warm welcome we've had. So thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. Narissa Golden, Discover Montserrat. Several of you, I think both Governor Tucker and Adam, you've used the word ambition. Can you give us an example of some of these ideas or recommendations that you've heard that express this?
Do you want me to take that one? Yeah. Yeah. So I think what we've seen in the past is we've seen injections of UK funding sporadically and not necessarily joined up. So I think building on existing projects like the subsea cable, the fibre optic cable, then linking that up to the investment in things like the CT scanner. You're going to have the CT scanner and the mammography 3D scanner is going to be the only ones in the region. How we can then build on that to hopefully at one point bring in not only just sort of locals having self-services here, but build that up as part of the hospital, part of maybe a health tourism industry. I think only because of the work we've seen with that strategic vision, thinking about the outcomes and the effects, that we can build that forward going forward.
Thank you, Adam. I just add to that. I think one of the things that's really critical, and we're seeing, is that any work that's, well, any project, if you like, is not really a project anymore. It's a program of work, and it cuts across all the ministries. So if we're looking at food security, you're looking at agriculture, you're looking at health, you're looking at jobs for people, you're looking at the long-term benefits. And as Adam said, it's that outcome piece. So it's a real strategic approach in terms of where does Montserrat need to get to, and what are the stepping stones to get there with some real in-year delivery, which I think is a really positive thing. And it's bringing everything together. So the investment, so the opportunities, as Adam said, the health is an example there. So any work that's done, how does that benefit the whole of the community? Where does it bring jobs? Where does it bring opportunity for people to learn new skills? And how does that move us forward? And I think that strategic thinking is really positive. And I can assure you there's an awful lot of ambition. I mean, I'm a bit gung-ho, I think, trying to go forward, but this has blown me away in terms of the amount of thinking that's gone into it. So it's good to have high ambition. We can't deliver it all at once, but I think, there's plenty to go at. And I think there's a real thought for how do we move Montserrat forward? How do we stop just thinking about the now and start thinking about tomorrow and the next day? And that's what I've seen, I think.
May I just add that whereas in years we look at single item, a single focus, we are now trying to tie all the strands together. So it's no longer just talking about budgetary aid, but what are we doing in terms of building the economy? What are the strands that we required to grow the economy? How do we get from point A? Is it a 5-year, 10-year plan? Rather just focusing on a 1-year budget. Are we looking at a long-term budget? Yes, the end figures are significant, but that is the ambition, because you talk about millions, but we know it's not going to take 1 year, one cycle, but we put it on the table and we work towards building Montserrat. Years gone by, we just focus on this year's budget, and that's it. No, this year is different. So that is the kind of strategic approach that we're taking in terms of moving Montserrat forward.
If I may, just thinking, so I think where projects have been disjointed in the past, if there's a building X building and then not thinking about how that transforms into better services for people in Montserrat. So the hospital, really good case in point. That's great that that's underway. That's a long time promised. But we've seen some really good work, which we're supporting in the Ministry of Health, on how you transform that. So it's it's not just a building, it's about better public service, holistic health in Montserrat.
I know we're short on time, but I just wanted to say I'm a bit concerned with the use of the word ambition, because for me, what you've expressed seems to me what the vision has been all along, that you've been working on a long term. It's not a 1-year thing in terms of our budgets for the last few years. And most of what you've outlined are things that I would almost think would be normal in terms of how we would develop given our size and capacity. My last question, Premier, could you outline for us some of what your government presented as the way forward in terms of things to help support economic activity? What did your government present?
Okay, we deal with a number of issues, and I know the vexing one is access. And we look at access again because we all know the history of access. Let's not go in the past. But we recognize that access has a role to play in terms of the building our economy. We look at how do we, in terms of our generation, electricity generation, we added that. In terms of how we pull the other economic strategies together, not just the little things that we talk about. Maintenance of government properties. Government, we're in this area for about 25 years. We have built buildings, and for the past 15 years, no maintenance has been done to them. The maintenance budget is huge, but maintenance of government buildings can create jobs while at the same time protecting government assets. We also look at how we can retain our public servants, nurses and teachers. And we talk about what is required to do that, how to move forward. So these are some of the things that we have discussed and presented to FCDO. Of course, the long-term projects in terms of how do we network to get other investors coming to Montserrat. These are part of the process. And that is why this ambition, this word ambitious comes in, because you're not just looking at the short term, because over the years, we have looked at FCDO to provide us with everything. Are there other partners out there that we need to get to? And who lead us to those partners that we can go and talk to them? We didn't invest in something else. So what we're doing is set up this networking with FCDO. So they tell us, well, across Whitehall, across London, these are the stakeholders that you can talk to. These are the ministries and ministers you can talk to. So we're looking at a long-term plan. And that's where we are right now. And these are the sort of things that we presented. But it's huge. And I don't want to go into detail as to all the areas because it's huge. But
To hear some of that, because we really don't know. You've spoken in generalities, so a little bit more specifics I think would help the public understand what is it, the vision of MCAP, because right now we're not sure what that is.
the image is really to build our economy. How do we build the economy? We have to make sure that we create jobs. We have to create employment for people. We have to raise the living standards. We cannot do it on budgetary aid. It just cannot. So what we have to do now, in addition to using the budget to form some kind of employment, is to go outside of that budget and find the necessary resources. There are funds for geothermal. There are funds for green energy. There are funds for that. Where are they and how do we tap into those? And these are some of the things we forward because we're talking about green energy and we want to move away from fossil fuel, but we don't have the resources locally. So what we are working with FCDO to do is to find possible investors into geothermal and that kind of thing to come in. And all the areas that goes along with it. So we are clear where we want to get. What we don't have is how we get, what we need to get there. And that's why we're working with FCDO. What do we need? And how do we get those resources to get where we want to go?
Morning, James White, Radio Montserrat. And I want to start by thanking the British government for the support that they have given to us in terms of, assisting the budget and also the extra money for the critical pieces of medical equipment. I'd like to openly say thank you for that. But the procurement process would not take place until the end of the financial year. Around March, So in the interim, what do we do? And I'm looking specifically at the bread and butter issues. Adam, I'm gonna target you first. And I recall very vividly that last year, at the last FAM, a question was posed to you regarding the cost of living. These are bread and butter issues. And I recall you saying that you were taken aback by the cost of living. And my first question to you is, what is your observation this time around? You've been here about a week now. Yeah, what's your observation on that?
Yeah, so, thank you, Governor. In terms of cost of living, yes, we find around the world on small island states, it's high, but I notice how high it is for Montserratians. First thing I do, always go in the shops, have a look how much basic foods cost and stuff. As a parent, I shop at the price of nappies. That was terrifying, seeing how much that was. But the important thing for me is that we can support the government of Montserrat to take the decisions about what they do in terms of cost of living and the packages to support. We were able to get a small uplift last year, and I think why the FAM is really important this year is to kind of gather all that data and take that back. But directly answering your question, yes, it always does worry me about the cost of living. And sorry, just one thing to add, unless that's why when the pound depreciated, that we worked with the Governor and the Premier to get that extra support to make sure that the budget was maintained at EC level.
Okay, and based on what you've said, I'm going to bring in Governor, Your Excellency. I'm going to bring you in here now. The situation as it stands on the ground, the reality of the situation is that people are struggling, and in very, very high standards too. People are struggling. I'm going to bring in the request by the union, the Montserrat Civil Service Association, and their request for a 10% increase for public servants. And I also recalled hearing you saying, or using the word unrealistic in the current environment. And based on what Adam said just now, do you still maintain your position on that?
Thank you, James. I'm afraid I do. And the two things are different things, aren't they? The cost of living here is high. And I hope with the package that we get from the FCGO and the work that's ongoing here, that the Government of Montserrat will be able to do something there, and that's for Premier and Cabinet to decide. But I look at it from the question I was asked is about the global economic situation where everybody's struggling. And if we're just, if our answer is to get more funding for that, I don't think that's realistic, because we have to get a funding envelope and then allocate that across Montserrat for the different areas. So to uplift the public sector by 10%, and I appreciate that people are struggling. I'm a public servant myself. I know what that's like. We've not had a pay increase in the UK for a very long time. And I hope that something can be done. But I don't think it's realistic to take 10% there, because that means there's not funding to do other things. You know, everything is about a balance and a compromise. You have to balance your budget. And so to put 10% into the public service, and not in the private sector, what happens there? People in the private sector are also struggling. Do we think that private sector can afford to give 10%? You know, you created a greater disparity. So I think there has to be a realistic approach, and I'm sorry to use those words, but we are in a very tight global economic situation. So it's unrealistic to ask for 10%, I think, at this stage. It's not unrealistic to expect something to be done. It's not unrealistic to expect some support in such high cost of living. And I know that the Government of Montserrat, I won't answer, you know, I won't speak for them, but Premier will answer, I'm sure, that work is ongoing to do the very best that can be done for the public service. Yep. And I, you know, it's not for me to decide what public servants get, but I do think that public servants work really hard. They need to be recognised for that in the way that we can. But we are in a very tight economic situation. So there is not, you know, everybody, when I arrived, Governor, can I have? Governor, can I have? I don't come with a checkbook. I don't have that funding. I will always do my very best to work with the Government of Montserrat to make sure that we get the most support we can from the FCGO so that those decisions can be made. But I'm a realist in terms of what I think is available from the UK.
Your Excellency, I hear all what you're saying, and you know, my colleague alluded to generalizations and so on with the world standard, what is happening around the world. And Montserrat has a number of unique circumstances which we must always take into consideration. And generalizing here is not gonna help the situation. We've heard a lot of rhetoric and a lot of suppositions based on world trends and so on. And I think we need to get away from that and deal with the situation as it stands here on Montserrat. What are the needs, reasonable needs of Montserrat and the people? I am not happy with the word unrealistic, given the current situation, as Adam pointed out to us. So based on what he said, I think we should be, you know, taking our cue from that. And the response, I'm not satisfied with the response. I must say that.
Can I add something? And obviously, I agree with what the Governor says in terms of this is a decision for the Cabinet of Montserrat to take, so I'm not going to comment on what they should do. But just looking at what we've done in the UK, we haven't had pay rises, but where there have been pay rises, they have not been uniform. They've been picking out individual sectors, the lowest paid, or where they've been unable to recruit or retain staff. So there are different ways of looking at it, but as the Governor says, there is a trade-off in that. So that's something that the government and the Cabinet of Montserrat are going to have to look at.
Okay. I want my other colleague to get in, but I must say this. When we look at the rate of inflation in Montserrat, it is not sustainable, basically, to continue to live, as we would put it. You know, what are you doing to sort of cushion the effect of that inflation?
Do you want me to say?
Can I just?
Yeah.
Thank you, and I'll pass it on. Premier, I'm sure will want to talk about this, some of the things that the government has done in terms of food pricing and things. I think you have to look at the economic situation in terms of what can you do across the board. So it's not just about salary increases, it's also about job creation, it's also about food availability. And so it's trying to get that balance to make sure that there is fresh food available that people can afford to buy. So you need to make some investment in agriculture to make sure that happens. And government looks across all of those things, and Premier will talk about he and his cabinet in terms of that approach. Just to pick up on Adam's point, and that's the discussion I've had, and I met with the Civil Service Association some time ago to talk about the fact that we've got the low earners that need to be supported, and so, you know, is it fair to give everybody 10%, or is it fair to make sure that those that are in the very low incomes have an uplift that supports them, so that they're brought out of those challenges with social services support, because that's where we know people are there, and that's why we have Adam and the team here to see the challenges that we have here in Montserrat. So I don't think you can do a blanket increase. It just doesn't work that way. You can use a pot of money and you can fund that across the public service to make sure that you look after those that are most vulnerable, and then you work through the system. And I think it's that sort of thing that I would take an approach, as we do in the UK and as you do across, you know, all Caribbean islands. Just on cost of living, you know, it never ceases to amaze me how hard it is to get things here and how expensive it is. And I genuinely understand that, and I genuinely want to do my best. But I am a realist. I'm not going to say to the public that I think that we can achieve that, because I know that if I sit with the Premier and ask the FCGO for you know, a huge amount of money, it's not going to happen. So why would I say that to the public if it's not something that I think we can deliver? I'd much rather work really hard to get something sustainable than I would say something that's not true. So I know it's not the answer you want, James, and I'm sorry, but I will always be honest in terms of what I believe is achievable. And can I hand to Premier on this, because he might want to talk to you about salaries.
Let me just ask you a question before you pass on, and then I'll hand over to my colleague. What figure then is on the table that is considered reasonable?
Not for me to make you know, that's for the government of Montserrat.
Well, that is what we haven't been looking at overall figures. We've been literally going through each ministry, looking at projects, different lines and budgets, and working out how that all comes together. And then the pressure is now onto us to go away and get the best deal we can for Montserrat, to give the government of Montserrat, the cabinet, the decisions, the autonomy to make the decisions within that budget.
Just before Bennett comes in, I think we all live here. We all feel the squeeze. All of us have families, we have children, we pay bills, all of us. And clearly, there's no denying the cost of living has gone up over the past year. And we may not generalize, but it's not our making, because we import 99% of what we eat. And so inflation is really imported inflation rather than us creating ourselves. When we talk, we listen and we look at literature, and when we look at the literature, the current inflation rate in Montserrat is 4.8%, with a potential of 5.5 at the end of the year. But that's not equated across the grocery stores. Yes, there are movements in prices in the stores. Yes, it's clearly, we see that. But there's something that remains standard. So when you talk about inflation rate, and I see somebody talk about 21%, 11%, and that cannot be true, because you know that 21% would just take things out of the thing. The point is, government has, over the last year, been working to see how best we can cushion the impact of the inflation on persons. When we came out of COVID, just coming to COVID, we tried to provide some assistance for the small businesses to get them back on their feet. We struggled to find ways and means of helping to alleviate the households, and we finally came up with a $1.5 million to offset the utility bills, because we recognize that fuel price is high, fuel surcharge is out of whack, and that is what increase our bills. So we actually dedicated $1.5 million 2 months ago, 2 months ago, to cushion and to help people over a 3-month period to offset those utility bills. Granted, the distribution might not be what we want, but the whole case, the whole idea here is on vulnerability. And the people who are suffering most gets most of it. And that is that's the position that we have. And that's what we had to do, because clearly there are people at the bottom of the ladder who are struggling even more harder than some of us. For instance, there are some public servants on the lower scale of the R scale, which we know that they are really below the minimum wage in some countries. And we're working. So what we're doing here in terms of helping people is not just a single strong approach. First of all, they have the nurses, the anomalies between the nurses, teachers, and police salary scale in relation to other public servants. We promised to fix that, and that's a promise that the government have made. We tried to fix it earlier, we didn't have the funds to do it, but we're working on that. We also said, and made a commitment last year, that we look at public servant salary, and we actually, 7% was in the making, 10% increase. That is still on the table. How we distribute that 7%, whether 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, it's not yet finalized, but Cabinet is very much involved in discussing the way forward. So it's not that things are not being done, we are discussing, but there are competing priorities within our budgets. We have to determine exactly what do I want to cut. If I have £23 million for the budget for this year, the question I ask myself and my team, what exactly can we give up in order to give something else out? Because once you give up something, once you want to introduce something new, you must give up something, unless we're going to get new monies which have not come. So it clearly is that government is working to do what we have to do, and we will find ways and means within our means to do what is available. But clearly, we have a pocket of funds, and that is what we have to deal with. Yes, we can pay public servant salary, and we can cut out healthcare services. We can pay public servant salary, and we can not bring access in. We can do a number of things, but at the end of the day, something is going to be left behind, and that is where we are. Yes, there's difficulty. Some people are struggling, and some more than others. We are aware of that, so we're not ignorant of that. But we have to work within our means, and we are working to see how best we can get out of it.
Hello, good morning again. Good morning, Bennett Roach, the Montserrat reporter. I didn't see you yesterday, Adam, and I was wondering, I did ask the question whether you were with the team, and if the team that you brought, who else beside you have been here before, has been here before?
One of them sat behind me.
Don't remember your face.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a mixture of people who were dealing on the capital projects, on sort of the economists, all sorts of people who work on Montserrat. But we also, as the Governor said, we've had a series of ongoing visits. So we had our policing advisor here supporting the Commissioner, someone helping with sort of borders and immigration with a transformation program there. So it's a variety of people we're trying to bring in on a continuing rolling process.
Thank you. From here, I'll begin with you just on that last little conversation you just had. Where is that? You mentioned in your thing there about discussions. With whom do you have these discussions when you're considering, for example, that matter that James raised regarding the cost of living, etc.? With whom do you have these discussions to try and come to common ground? Because we know the problems. Adam talks about what have taken place in terms of funding. A problem that I have noticed, for example, is that every time we ask, why is this not happening, why is that not happening, they keep saying, well, DFID. Well, pardon me for saying DFID, is what's on my lips, FCDO. They do not give us what we want, what we ask for. And recently I've asked, let me see what how you've asked and what you've asked for. We don't see those things. But I can talk about one very simple thing, and it has to do with the hospital and all the homes, the homes that we have. A simple thing like a lift. Nowhere, because I am very familiar with what happens in the UK, nowhere do they have a situation where anybody has to lift a patient or whatever. That's a serious, serious thing. And they're telling me that DFID sorry, FCDO will not. Mr. Roach, you don't know how difficult it is. We can't get this and can't get that. I have a problem with that kind of thought. And the thing is, who do you discuss? Well, I'd love an answer to this. Who do you have these discussions with? And I'm asking that question on the background that in 2020, my first press conference after I got back from the UK, was where the proposal was made when you talked about an economic committee. I asked the question, who comprises this economic community? You couldn't answer it, but the PMO offered some answers. And the suggestion that I made was, should we not include more people from the private sector who perhaps can be more informative in terms of the things you're discussing to help you come to decisions and so on? He later told me, the PMO later told me that he had taken it on board. Have we done anything about that? And that's on the background of that I'm asking this question about with whom do you have these discussions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Roach. There's a process for discussion and negotiation. Of course, politicians have ideas, and we meet in cabinet, and we discuss those in cabinet, and we take a policy decision. And those policy decisions, we then go on to speak to FCDO. And this is exactly, this is a replica of...
But that's exactly what I'm saying. You see where you came from? You discussed it in cabinet.
Yeah.
Cabinet must have discussed these with the officials, the people who would have had the information to inform cabinet. The technicians, thank you,
Yeah,
James.
yeah.
The technicians and so on and so on. What I'm asking is, along with those technicians, who else are involved? How are they informed? How are even the technicians informed? You see, when you tell me you discuss it in cabinet, that is what I'm saying the problem is. You're discussing it in cabinet on what? Who informed the cabinet? As to me, you should be just going there with your information discussions and your almost your decisions to thing. What I want to know is who are the people who you've been using. And I gave you the background. I try and give you the background on why I'm asking that. But you jumped to cabinet. Cabinet. I'm sorry. Get 2 steps below that.
You're correct. Policy decisions are formed by politicians say to technicians, we have this idea. Cost of living, for instance. What do I do? We know this cost of living. So we said to the technicians, we talk to them and say, this is the problem. How do we strategize? How do we develop a policy to that? That policy has to be developed, of course. And we speak to the technicians, and of course, once the technicians bring that to you, you take it to cabinet. Cabinet then discuss it. If funds are required that you don't have, clearly the next step is to move on to the FCDO, of course. I'm not going to blame the FCDO for not giving us, because I understand, but we take it to the FCDO. But within our budget, if there are means within our budget that we can do those things, we'll do them. If the need for additional funding, then we make a business case for those additional funding. That's the process. And clearly, if you're asking that I should have a public forum to discuss those issues, then that's something else that we could talk about. But this is the process that we operate. Cabinet makes decisions and advance those decisions so that at least the benefits of the people can derive benefits from our discussions through the FCDO and other forums. That's basically the process.
Just come in on that. So it's a role for the public service there. So we always say, public service advise, ministers decide. And that's really how it should be. Yeah? So public servants then have to go out. So if Premier or any of the ministers ask for some information, it's the job of the technicians to go out and do that homework and make sure that information is there. And as an example of that, so we met this week with the fishers and farmers, thanks to Dr. Selwyn Maloney and Minister, and we sat down with them hearing how they're working with the ministry. And some of it gets through and some of it doesn't, some of it works, some of it the fishers and farmers are not quite ready to take forward, some of it the ministry can't quite get progression on yet. But there is a real dialogue that happens there in terms of how those papers then come up to Cabinet. And one of the jobs of the public servant is to make sure that we go out and get that information. So the Deputy Governor will be working with OPS all the time. They have discussions to make sure that they're putting enough information in there. And if that's lacking, then that's something we can look at in terms of the way that the technicians gather that data that goes back to politicians, because we should always put up advice in terms of what is happening in Montserrat, and and sometimes options. You know, it's not a question of, I want to do X, yes, here's how you do X. It's, you want to do X, here are some options, ministers, in terms of how you might take that forward. And that's one of the things that we're trying to develop to make sure that the public service do go up and advise with options for Cabinet to discuss. And I wouldn't ever give up Cabinet confidentiality, but I can tell you, as someone that chairs it, there's a lot of discussion and there's a lot of challenge in terms of the information that comes up and papers get sent back. So, you know, but that's for the technicians to really provide that advice to politicians. So I take that on board, that we need to do more in the public service, and we will. So
Thanks for understanding my question and an attempt to answer it. That's part of it, partly answered, and I appreciate. I think you're on the right track in terms of what I'm trying to get to. Adam, how do you respond to the question? I'm taking this up now too on the fact that you talk about we're not here to mark people's homework.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to ask you to explain that, because I'll just say ahead of time. I'd love to see how we spent the first 2.5 million. Let me give the little background, where the British government at the beginning, in March of February of 2020, when they offered to the territories, it was announced we're going to be used some £1 trillion for this pandemic, which was upcoming, and which was upon the world. And they had stated they were going to give the territories £2.5 million, I think, in two tranches of 2.5 to begin with. Big discussion before we actually got to that first tranche and so on and so on. I had explanations about our previous governor, who I have a lot of issues with, who prevented them from getting the first situation, and I don't know what has happened. What I do not know is how that money was disbursed. For one thing, I am going to say it here. I, the Montserrat Reporter, and Montserrat Printing and Publishing Limited, did not benefit from that at all. And it created such a problem for me. I have not been able to function since then, because I can't afford staff. Just didn't have it. Maybe if I was on the ground at the time, maybe something could have happened. But have you seen, is there something that explained to you how that particular, because that wasn't a budgeted, that wasn't budgeted money. So how was that spent?
Yeah, I can't comment on the detail now, but what I can tell you is what is really valuable for me and the team being here now is talking about how, just as you're saying, how that any money injected then goes out to benefit the wider community. And I can tell you one of the things we were talking about was, if we're saying doing a big capital project, big capital injection, or a small one, say maintenance or something like that, how smaller contractors can either access that, you know, through the procurement system, or club together, and how we can get people like the farmers and fishers working together. Because it's, I think we see this in infrastructure projects and capital injection across the world. It's the bigger players are always the ones who are ready to go, have the resources to compete. So it's really important for us that it does have that trickle-down effect, and people in different scales across the economy can all access that. And I think one of the things for me which is critical is if we are thinking about further injections of capital cash into Montserrat, we're thinking about it not just in terms of hard infrastructure, but also what impact that has on the economy, you know, creating jobs, trickling down throughout the economy. So it's important for us to sit here working through the ministries of how that's going to happen and get the value for money across the society on the island.
You talked about police relationship and whatever is going on with police relationship and training and so on. And everything. There's been a big investigation going on, and all I've been able to get is what I hear from people on the street, what people are saying. Governor Pierce one time said to me, when I approached him about that well over a year ago, last year, February or sometime like that, or March, whenever it was, who had directed me to the police. But I said, no, this is beyond the police. I eventually went to the police. They don't have any information about this investigation that's going on. And so when you tell me about the relationship that is being built between the local police and the police, but when we have British police coming in to do investigations, and the public cannot know what these investigations are about. I was surprised to hear about that police relationship. So can you explain why am I having this difficulty?
Yeah.
Thank you. So police matters are police matters, and it's for the police to comment on any investigation. I just want to clarify that it's not British police coming in working as British police. These are officers that have come in and they work for the police commissioner. They are sworn in Montserrat Police Force. They're additional resources to help the police force in terms of doing their job, and they report through to the police commissioner. So that is how it operates, and investigations they do under the RMPS are for the police commissioner. So I'm not privy to any information. Nobody here is privy to, that is for the police to investigate. And when the police are ready to talk about those investigations, they will do. And that's how the structure is in place. There are some other aspects of the relationship we have with Suffolk, which is really positive in terms of training. We had Nikki Wallace here. We've now got Nigel Huddleston here. And he's here to work with the police commissioner in terms of best practice. We've now got radios that the police can use so we can have that connectivity and safety across, and that's gone into the prison too. And they're doing some work now on road safety and developing policies to make sure that the police have got the very best training they can. So there's all different aspects, but it's for the police commissioner to comment on any investigations, and none of this panel are able to do so, I'm afraid.
Just to add one thing more broadly across the overseas territories, what we've been trying to do is move away from a situation where the FCDO thought it was the experts on prisons, policing and stuff like that. We aren't, but there is that expertise in the UK government. So we have been linking up across the territories, different sectors with each other. So Suffolk Police and Montserrat Police, or social services in Suffolk, and again, buddying people across the public service to share best practice both ways and look for opportunities for people to go and shadow both ways.
I'm feeling a little awkward because I do not know, based on what the governor just said, where the police is concerned. I don't think you understood what I said, that I had spoken to the police to try and find out what was going on, and they were not able. I am not going to tell you exactly what they said to me, but there's a serious conflict between what you just said and what you said regarding that and what is happening overall. So, yes, Ernest, I know, but we did start late, didn't we? No, nothing to do with me. I didn't hold up anybody. But anyhow, let's yes. Hold on.
This should be the last question before we close off, please. Thank you.
Anyhow, I've had my chat with the governor already. Regarding the 30 million pounds that have been allocated. You said it has been fully subscribed. Could you explain that for me, please?
Yeah, fully subscribed in the sense of that all the projects have been allocated to make it get a value up to £30 million, including the hospital. So it's then the case of just getting the money spent now. So getting shovels in the ground and the infrastructure built.
3 years. 3 years from 2019, when I sat with John Gordon.
Yeah.
And had a discussion about that £30 million. It's now over 3 years. And that's where we are. We haven't seen, yes, I know about the port and all of that, and it just
So the port is separate. The port is extra additional funding, but then there's this fibre optic cable, the resurfacing of the runway, the airport control tower, the hot mix plant. There's all those other things in the mix. But the hospital takes, and the school blocks L&M, but the hospital takes up a big chunk of the programme.
If I may just interject that one. I hear Mr. Roach about 3 years, but I think we forget one thing. And I'm not defending it. We had 2 years shut down. And everybody seemed to forget that we had 2 years of COVID.
Yeah.
And as a government, I think we clap ourselves well because we have delivered. The only major project that's left, and the money is not an island, the money can even comes to us in tranches. The only project that's left, that's not finished, is the hospital. And significant work has been ongoing. Throughout COVID, we completed a number of those projects, even though we were locked down. And the only project that's left to be completed, which will start in full next year, hopefully, is the hospital. We are now in the design, final detailed designs, and that is the bulk of that money. So half of that 30 million pounds is really for the hospital. The rest of it is basically spent off, basically, in all the areas that I don't want to list right now. So to say after 3 years the money is not spent is not quite, correct, because half of it has been spent already.
Thank you so very much. Thank you to the members of the panel, and thank you to the members of the media for being with us here today. And with that, we are going to close this press conference off and wish everyone a really good day. Thank you very much.